As I opened my eyes, I found myself surrounded by the sight of a hospital room, with white curtains gently swaying in the breeze. I sat up, realizing that my head was wrapped in bandages, a tangible reminder of the ordeal I had been through. The impact of hitting my head had left me with a strange sensation, as if the pieces of my memory had been scattered, leaving me with an unsettling feeling of disconnection. The events leading up to my fall down the stairs felt like a distant dream, the pain that had coursed through my body now a fading memory. A doctor in a white coat entered the room, asking if I could recall what had happened before I lost consciousness. When I confirmed that I had indeed fallen down the stairs, a look of relief washed over the doctor's face. The tests had shown no significant damage to my head or brain, a small miracle considering the circumstances. I had only been unconscious for a few hours, thanks to my husband James and our son Oliver, who had called for an ambulance. The doctor informed me that the earthquake hadn't been too severe and that our house was still standing, unscathed by the tremors. It seemed that I had simply been startled by the minor quake, causing me to lose my footing and tumble down the staircase. A wave of embarrassment washed over me, and I couldn't help but let out a wry chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. Suddenly, I realized that my family, who had been with me earlier, were nowhere to be seen. I asked the nearby nurses about James and Oliver's whereabouts, and they exchanged glances, a hint of unease in their eyes. One of the nurses hesitantly began to speak, her voice tinged with reluctance. "Well, this is difficult to say, but my name is Sophia, and I am 45 years old this year. My father was an art teacher, and from a young age, he taught me everything from brush techniques to color theory. Under his guidance, my artistic talent blossomed, and I dreamed of one day opening my own art studio, just like him. Perhaps due to my father's influence, I was confident in my ability to paint. In school, my art teachers always praised my work, and I even won awards for my paintings. Each time, my father would affectionately ruffle my hair, but he always said the same thing. But Sophia, while your paintings are beautiful, don't be afraid to express yourself more freely." In my memories, my father was always kind and deeply passionate about the world of art. As I grew older and found the love of my life in James, and we were blessed with our son Oliver, my dream of opening an art studio faded into a distant memory. After getting married, I left home, and though we faced many challenges, we lived a happy life together. Then, the day came when both my parents passed away. As an only child, I was at a loss about what to do with the empty family home, but after discussing it with James, we decided to move back into the house where I grew up. Living under the same roof where I had spent so many years with my late parents, I felt a profound sense of happiness at the thought of starting a new chapter with James and Oliver by my side. The art studio where I learned to paint from my father during my childhood remained untouched, as if time had stood still, with no unnecessary items cluttering the space. I heard that my father had continued teaching art to the neighborhood children in this very studio until his final days. My mother had apparently been regularly cleaning the studio that my late father had left behind. "Sophia, sorry to bother you, but could you make some room for me to pass through?" James asked as he placed several cardboard boxes in the corner of the art studio. Just before we moved, James had quit his job and started his own business. It seemed that he was dissatisfied with both his stagnant salary and the nature of his work. Seizing this turning point, James decided to go independent and began an online secondhand store, utilizing our spacious family home for sales and purchases. Having just quit his job and started a new venture, it was unlikely that things would go smoothly right away. Despite my concerns, James continued to acquire more and more products, and the number of boxes in our home began to grow. Every day, new cardboard boxes appeared, and the unused rooms on the second floor became filled with an increasing amount of merchandise. Meanwhile, Oliver, who had dropped out of college, was spending more time at home. He was helping James with the secondhand store business, but seemed to be struggling to find his own path in life. James never consulted me about quitting his job. A few months before we moved, he simply told me, "I quit my job," without much explanation. Oliver also dropped out of college without discussing it with me. Although I was worried about my family's selfish actions, I witnessed James and Oliver working together, putting their efforts into the business. They were reaching out to potential buyers online for appraisals, taking photos for online listings, and seemed to be enjoying the process of trial and error in their work. I decided not to interfere with their efforts and instead focused on creating an environment where they could work comfortably. It seems my dream of opening an art studio is still a long way off. For now, I'll devote myself to my family. That was my top priority right now. In the corner of the now unused art studio, I found piles of old tools and books, filling me with a sense of regret and sadness. Upstairs, I could hear the busy sounds of James and Oliver working on the second-hand store business. I sat by the window in the living room and opened my father's brush case. Inside, I found the brushes that my father had cherished. As I instinctively reached for them, I heard James' voice behind me. "Sophia, what's the matter?" I gripped the brush tightly and turned around. "I always wanted to open an art studio, just like Dad, but I guess it's too late now, isn't it?" James listened to my words quietly and gave a small nod. He took a step closer and placed his hand on my shoulder. "Sophia, you have a talent for painting. I believe you could open an art studio, but for now, could you support me until my business takes off?" James asked. Just as I was feeling a bit disheartened, thinking that he had skillfully dodged the topic, James continued with a smile. "Let's support each other's dreams as a family. We'll work hard together." I had a feeling that the day I would open my art studio might never come. However, James' kind words made me happy, and I held his warm hand tightly. One evening, it seemed that James and Oliver were busy working on the second floor. They were talking to someone on the phone, carrying items from upstairs to load into the car, and then returning to the second floor again, leaving me no chance to talk to them. After thinking for a while, I quietly climbed the stairs, intending to bring them some drinks. As I approached the room, I heard the sound of the two of them packing up their goods. The moment I opened the door, James and Oliver looked at me with surprised expressions, stopping what they were doing and turning their attention towards me. "Sophia, is something wrong? I came to check on you during your break. You two must be tired, right? I brought you some drinks." James pointed to a product on the desk in the room with a wry smile. It was a wallet from a well-known brand that even I recognized. "There's so much to do, and it feels never-ending. The income from recycled goods can be unpredictable, and sometimes our estimates are way off, you know?" I nodded, showing my understanding. I, too, had been worried and anxious about James quitting his job, going independent, and starting a new business. However, I stayed silent because he seemed to be enjoying himself more than he did during his office worker days. Recently, though, James and Oliver had started to pay attention to product information on a daily basis. Even when we went out shopping or on outings, they frequently checked market prices on their smartphones. On the rare occasions when we took a day off to go out, if they got information about a nearby flea market, they would happily go around looking at the items for sale. You can't underestimate flea markets. Sometimes amateurs sell things without knowing their true value. I was getting a bit tired of them constantly talking about the prices of things. They even started discussing, with straight faces, how much they could sell some of the paintings left by my father, which were created by famous artists and held great sentimental value to me. The very idea of selling my father's mementos felt like a desecration to me. Even so, I had resigned myself to it, thinking it was just a difference in values, but there was one incident that made me genuinely angry. James and Oliver prefaced it by saying it was a joke, but they started talking about falsely claiming my paintings as the work of a famous artist and selling them. They praised my paintings, saying that even amateurs wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but I had mixed feelings. At first, they were talking about it in a joking, light-hearted way, but gradually it became more concrete, and I yelled at them in a serious tone.
That's absolutely not okay. I can't believe you'd even consider such a thing. Do you have any idea how much I treasure the painting skills I learned from my father?
For me, painting is a memory and a connection with my father. I felt intense disgust at the idea of using my paintings, which I had gained through my connection with my father, for such an impure act. Seeing my reaction, James continued in a flustered manner.
It was just a joke. Oliver was only fooling around with you.
Oliver was surprised to have the conversation turned on him, saying,
"What?"
But he nodded quietly, mumbling something under his breath. I could tell that the two of them were desperately trying to appease me, as I was in a bad mood. Perhaps because of this incident, James and Oliver started making excuses to keep me from getting involved in their secondhand store business. I sensed this and made a point not to go to the second floor, which they were using as their workplace. One morning, I got a call on my smartphone from James, who had left earlier saying he had an important deal to make. I could sense James' agitation over the phone.
"Sophia, something terrible has happened. I forgot the important documents I was supposed to bring to the client. I'm rushing back now, but I don't think I'll make it in time for our appointment. I'm sorry, but could you quickly grab the documents and wait for me at the front door?"
He sounded desperate, and I could hear James' heavy breathing. He was driving back home, but our garage is narrow, so it takes time to park. He wanted me to wait in front of the house with the documents so he could pick them up without getting out of the car, saving even a little bit of time.
"I can't get through to Oliver, who should be at home. I think he probably went out. Anyway, there are some documents on the desk on the second floor, so please bring all of them. Also, they're important documents, so do not look inside." "I mean it." "Got it,"
I replied, and after a few seconds of silence, James added, as if to emphasize his point,
"Don't you dare look inside."
"You don't have to tell me that. I wouldn't look at work documents anyway." I felt a little offended that he didn't trust me, but I went up to the second floor for the first time in a while and opened the door. Beyond the door, I was surprised to see a scene so cluttered that there was barely any space to step. Oliver, whom I thought wasn't in the room, turned around, startled by my visit. When I explained that I was going to deliver James' important documents, he pointed to the desk and went back to staring intently at his computer screen. "Sorry. I was so busy I didn't notice Dad's call. The documents are all together, so could you take all the papers in that envelope? Thanks, and sorry about this." As Oliver typed away on the keyboard with an annoyed expression, running his fingers through his disheveled hair, I felt a twinge of irritation. However, remembering the approaching deadline, I steeled myself. Just as I grabbed the envelope and was about to head down the stairs, I heard the sound of a car slamming on its brakes outside. Immediately, I panicked, realizing it was James, and at the same moment, there was a sound like a wall cracking right next to the stairs. An earthquake. The instant that thought crossed my mind, my footing faltered, and I lost my balance. I tumbled down the violently shaking stairs, and as my body finally came to a stop, I let out a groan of pain, my entire body in agony. My vision grew hazy, and I had the sensation of sinking into darkness. I thought I heard Oliver shouting my name from somewhere far away. Eventually, his voice and all the surrounding sounds seemed to be sucked into some distant world, and my consciousness faded. At that moment, I had lost consciousness, and I believe I was dreaming. Back when my father was still alive, I was painting with him in the art studio, holding the brush together. In a gentle voice, my father said,
"Sophia, you use such beautiful colors."
And then he asked me,
"What's your favorite color?"
Unable to think of a favorite color, I asked my father instead, "What color do you like, Dad?" In response, my father painted a picture of a blue sky.
"I like blue. Looking at a blue sky makes you feel refreshed and gives you hope, don't you think?" With hope, you can face any hardship. Life always needs hope.
My father's powerful words and his smile lingered in my mind. The next time I opened my eyes, I found myself in a hospital room, with white curtains swaying before me. I sat up and noticed that my head was wrapped in bandages. The impact of hitting my head had left me with a strange feeling of disconnection, as if the pieces of my memory had been scattered. The events of falling down the stairs felt like a distant dream, surreal and bizarre. Eventually, a doctor in a white coat entered the room and asked if I could remember what had happened before I lost consciousness. When I clearly stated that I had fallen down the stairs, relief washed over the doctor's face. According to the tests, there was no significant damage to my head or brain. I had only been unconscious for a few hours, and apparently, James and Oliver had called for an ambulance. The earthquake hadn't been too severe, and the house was unharmed, the doctor informed me. So, I had simply been startled by a minor quake and lost my footing. Perhaps it was the sense of relief, but I suddenly felt embarrassed and couldn't help but give a wry smile. Then it hit me that my family, who should have been with me, were nowhere to be seen. When I asked the nearby nurses about James and Oliver, they began exchanging glances. One of the nurses hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Well, this is difficult to say, but..." I tilted my head, watching the young nurse struggle to find the words. Just as the nurse was about to continue, a police officer quietly entered the room. The nurse's expressions changed, and they immediately made way for the officer and left the room. Suddenly feeling scared, I stammered.
"What?"
The large police officer let out a deep sigh and said, "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry to have to tell you this, but..." I couldn't help but tilt my head again. The nurse earlier had started with a similar preface. An unpleasant atmosphere was spreading through the hospital room. "Right now, your husband and Oliver are at the police station being questioned." As I stood there frozen with a blank expression, not understanding what was going on, the officer began to explain in a calm tone. When the paramedics arrived and the rescue team entered my house, they had contacted the police. I was unconscious, so I didn't know, but at that time, rather than worrying about me, James and Oliver had apparently acted suspiciously upon the arrival of the police. When the officer asked to see the stairs where the accident occurred, James responded,
"Why do you need to see them?"
He seemed troubled but refused to show the stairs.
"Actually, the police have been monitoring their actions for quite some time." "What? Monitoring? What do you mean by monitoring?"
Brushing past James and Oliver's attempts to stop them, the police officers went upstairs. Upon searching the house, they discovered counterfeit brand items and forged warranty documents, leading to their arrest on the spot.
"Before you fell down the stairs during the earthquake, you were asked to bring some documents, right? Those documents were forged appraisal certificates."
As I gradually understood the meaning of his words, the color drained from my face. Did the police suspect that I was also an accomplice in creating the counterfeit items, just like the two of them? From James and Oliver's statements at the police station, I heard that I had been uninvolved in the secondhand store business, but to prove it, I was asked to submit my smartphone, which I obediently did. After the doctor told me there were no issues with my examination, I took a taxi home. As I left the hospital, the evening sky had already given way to the veil of night. The inside of the taxi was dead silent, the distant city lights reflecting off the cloudy night sky. After simply telling the driver my destination, the taxi made its way through streets I didn't recognize. My heart felt as if it had gotten lost in a maze, shrouded in darkness. Suddenly, happy memories from the past flashed through my mind. When Oliver was young, he would always hand me his school textbooks, notebooks, and various other items that needed his name written on them. When I was too busy with dishes to do it, James would say to Oliver with a wry smile,
"Your mom's hands are full right now. Want me to write it for you instead?" "No. Mom's good at drawing, so I want her to do a little illustration next to my name too."
As I washed the dinner dishes, I'd tell them, Just leave it on the table, and I'll write it later. Then James would mischievously grab Oliver's notebook. While Oliver was taking his bath alone, James would make a silly face and say, "I'm gonna perfectly imitate your handwriting and drawing." After his bath, Oliver would look at the notebook with his name written in it, and with a beaming smile, he'd say to me,
"Thanks, Mom."
Oliver's smile back then was so radiant that it made my heart ache. As the taxi passed through the city, my heart was engulfed in agony. I quietly closed my eyes. I wished that when I opened them, it would all turn out to be a dream. If I could go back to those days, I would have scolded James, put the dishes aside, and written in Oliver's notebook myself. Why did I suddenly remember such a trivial thing from so long ago? Where did things go so wrong? My emotions, like waves, pulled in and pushed back despair and sorrow. In the midst of it all, I began to think that maybe James and Oliver had their reasons. But what possible excuse could make creating counterfeit items forgivable? As I was lost in these thoughts, the taxi had already arrived in front of our house without me realizing it. Our home, now empty. I went straight up to the second floor, and the room that had been so cluttered with items just a little while ago was now desolate. The computers and other devices must have been confiscated, black cords lying haphazardly in the corner, making the room feel as lifeless as if it had been burglarized. The interrogation of James and Oliver took several days. From their statements at the police station and the history on their smartphones, it became clear that I had not been involved in the sale of counterfeit brand items. Not only that, but it also came to light that the two of them had been keeping the production of the fake goods a secret from me. The police officers were sympathetic towards me and only had me provide a simple statement. "They're both desperately insisting that you had nothing to do with it. They were cooperative in submitting data from their smartphones and computers, and your name doesn't come up anywhere. It seems they really didn't want to cause you any trouble." If they didn't want to cause me trouble, then why did they do this in the first place? I let my shoulders slump and gazed up at the sky. Several years passed. On a still chilly spring afternoon, beautiful flowers were blooming in our garden. It had been a year since I reopened my father's art studio. When I opened the studio window, a refreshing breeze passed through. In front of me, 3 elementary school students sat in chairs, straightening their backs as they took out their art supplies from their bags and began setting up on the desks. I felt a deep love for this place that I had built with my own hands.
"Sophia, what kind of artwork are we going to create today?"
asked the oldest student, a 6th grader, as she finished her preparations. I smiled. "Today, let's try painting with the theme of a blue sky. Some of you may be going through tough times at school or at home. But when you look at a blue sky, it evokes a feeling of refreshment and gives us hope." All the students listened intently to my words. Then, after a short "yes," in response, they each picked up their brushes with serious expressions and faced their desks. In the quiet moment, the faint sound of brushes touching paper resonated. Painting time was always a special moment for me. As the students each picked up their brushes and engaged with their own colors, I too gazed at the blank sheet of drawing paper in front of me. My husband and son were sentenced to a $500,000 fine and 1 year in prison for the crime of manufacturing and selling counterfeit brand items. However, by paying a settlement to the affected stores and clients, they were granted a suspended sentence and avoided arrest, but were left with a massive debt. It seems that at first, James had been running the secondhand store business honestly. One day, when he bought an item that looked almost brand new, he tried selling it as in used rather than secondhand and found that it sold for more than double the usual price. Also, with luxury brand wallets and such, he learned that just because they lacked a warranty, their value would drop, but by simply copying the warranty, the price would jump up. Gradually, he found it boring to sell things honestly. He even started dealing in copycat products purchased from overseas websites, buying them and selling them online. Since everything was completed within the computer, there was no interaction with people, making it difficult for a sense of guilt to take root. Regarding this incident, James' relatives were furious and advised me to divorce him. Relatives who knew us well as a couple strongly encouraged me, saying that I absolutely did not need to bear the burden of the crime James had committed together with him, and so James and I got divorced. The relatives didn't abandon them. Although they were saddled with a massive debt, all the relatives earnestly encouraged their rehabilitation and helped them find work. Now, it seems they are living while working diligently. At a factory run by a relative, the two of them apparently work hard from early morning until late at night without complaining. I caused a lot of worry for my relatives and neighbors who learned about the situation through news and rumors. People who have known me since I was little said, "Sophia, that must have been so hard for you." They thought about my future life with me and suggested that I try opening an art studio to make a living. At first, I couldn't bring myself to be enthusiastic about it, but having lost James' income, I knew I had to do some kind of work. Before I knew it, my dream was starting to become reality. A student brings me the blue sky painting they finished to show me.
This part is really beautiful. It's good to mix several colors and use them for this area. Thank you very much.
After about an hour of class, the students start cleaning up on their own. As I watched the students preparing to go home, I felt like sharing a little and smiled at everyone.
Everyone, can you listen for a bit?
The students stopped what they were doing and looked at me curiously. In painting, there's the potential to express emotions and meaning through the power, delicacy, and sadness of colors, through the colors themselves. That's why students come to this studio on various days and times. Seeing the blue sky drawings made by the elementary school students displayed on the wall, I nodded deeply. Each child's blue sky seemed to be overflowing with radiance. I wondered if the blue sky I painted as a sample had this much beauty.
Teacher, do you think self-expression through painting is important?
Anyone can make mistakes. Just as painting has the power to express oneself, I believe that people can grow through self-expression. After the students politely left the studio, I picked up a brush again by myself. Next to the blue sky painting I had made, I placed a painting of a rainbow. I looked up at the clock on the wall. In a few more minutes, James and Oliver would be coming home for the first time in years. It wasn't that I invited them over because I wanted to start over with my ex-husband or anything like that. I probably can't forgive James and Oliver. But what I learned from this experience was the importance of living while respecting each other. They may have certainly committed a crime. But if they are facing their crime, working hard to live, and seeking a new way to express themselves, I want to support them. The doorbell rings. I put down my brush and started walking towards the front door. When I opened the door, James and Oliver were standing together in front of the entrance, hands clasped in front of them, eyes downcast. Seeing them for the first time in a while, they had gotten a bit bigger than before and gave off a powerful impression. Their hair was a little disheveled, and they were wearing slightly dirty clothes that seemed to be work attire, but it strangely suited them.
Please, come in.
As I said that, James quietly nodded and took a step into the entryway. No one knows how our relationship will turn out from here. I'll just do my best to live in a future that no one can predict.